start. And David Nixon is 30 years water engineering experience across councils, utilities, multinationals and small businesses in numerous roles, including chief operator, chief executive and director. He's actually now the founder and director of Stormwater Sydney. Obviously, it says a lot in the name, so that's very important for us. The topic today he's going to talk about is how homeowners can be dealing with stormwater on their properties. It's very important, especially as we develop more, adding granny flats, adding separate living spaces on our homes, and how the water leaves our site and how we deal with it on our side. Getting it wrong can be very costly. Please put your hands together for David Nixon. We are live streaming, everyone, and look forward to seeing you there too. Please come up.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Good. Oh, welcome to the Home Show. We're going to talk about stormwater in your home. Who here has been flooded out before, had water issues, got water coming in from their neighbour, or all of the above? Who here has gone to council to try to get some help and they've said, well, not our problem, your problem? Yeah, that happens continuously. What I want to do today is actually walk through some of the common stormwater issues and how you actually might be able to actually deal with them around your house and give you a little bit more of an understanding of stormwater and actually how it might affect your property. So let's talk stormwater. I'm going to start fairly basic just so we all understand what we're talking about, and then I'll actually get into some real case studies. So what is stormwater? Basically, stormwater is everything that leaves your property that doesn't go into the groundwater. So if it's piped to the street, it's piped to interlockment drainage, it runs into your neighbour's property, it is stormwater. Stormwater can have contaminants in it, so it can have sediment in it, it can have nutrients in it, anything that actually runs off your property. And that's what we consider stormwater to be. So it's also important that we talk about storms, because a lot of people want to stormproof their property, and that's not possible. One thing you find with water always wins. Has everybody been to the beach and seen a little toddler get taken out by a wave? Everybody's seen some of the issues that happened out Richmond area earlier in the year where houses were actually washing away. Water always wins. So what's important when we're talking about the house is to actually understand what storms are. And they're divided into three types of things. So you've got minor events. So that's an event that you expect to happen 1 to 10 years. They're what we put our drainage systems around our houses for. They've got the household drains that should deal with the water. They're normally designed by a plumber or an engineer. If you get that right, you will still have water problems. Because in a major event, which might happen 1 in 20 or 1 in 50 years, but it could happen twice in 1 year, because it's a statistical concept, they tend to forget about your household drainage. They overflow. You start getting water down the streets. All the local drainage has actually failed. And it's around the surcharges and where that overflow water can actually go. And that's a major storm event. Then you get the severe events. And we're talking about the Brisbane floods. We're talking about the recent floods. There is no stormwater system in the world that is designed to actually cater for those. Our river systems are catered for those. And we'll actually talk about those shortly. So they actually exceed the design capacity of all the stormwater systems. But it's important that the dwelling is above that level. You'll hear about a 1 in 100 year flood event. And most houses are built above that. And the reason you're built above that is once all your drains have failed, the street has failed, the water still doesn't rise to your house. It will flood your gardens. It could even go through garages. If it's an elevated house, it might go underneath, but it won't destroy your house. So that's a third level of protection that you actually have. All right, I'll just go through a few terms, and I'm sure everyone's aware of this. Yeah, and I'm starting from the top down. The rain falls on your roof, and it's important that your roof is actually in good condition at all times. You've got your gutters. There's a lot of good stuff I see leaf guard here somewhere. These days we protect our gutters to keep the leaves out so that leaves don't go actually into the stormwater systems. Downpipes. In the old days, you used to have some really ugly downpipes, and I'd be surprised if there's not a downpipe supplier here. Now have become an architectural feature of your property, and they can look really good, especially if you're actually starting to look at a new building. You've also got things like spreaders, and I'm not sure if you can see the second picture there, but that's where you actually take water from a higher roof and you spread it over a lower roof. And if your spreaders are right, you won't see an excess of water. It will just gently flow down. And then we got things in yards. So we got yard pits and we got strip drains. And these are all to take into consideration those minor flow events. Over the last 10, 15 years, councils have actually started enforcing water urban sensitive design. So most new properties now will actually have on-site stormwater detention, or OSDs, which is a tank underground which limits the flow away from your property. They will also have rainwater tanks with reuse on them, so that all your garden use is actually coming from your rainwater tank. So these are actually quite common things now. Any new property, you expect to actually install these types of things. Now, if we move out onto the street, you've got street drainage. So the street drainage is one of the places that the water will go from your property. It collects a household, it collects a road drainage, then it just gravitates away. So it gravitates actually into the council drains. The council drainage system tends to be pipes, culverts, box gutters, tends to be owned by the council and or Sydney Water in the Sydney area. And it's the systems that will actually handle most major events. It won't actually handle a severe event, but it'll handle most major events. Open drainage, and we all know this, most of the drains then actually pass into a creek, into a river, and they're mainly council controlled because they're mainly outdoor areas. There's another concept that you should be very aware of, especially in properties that have been developed over the last 20 years, and that's the concept of interallotment drainage. Most properties in a subdivision now will actually have a drainage easement. So if a property is sloping to the back away from the road, it will actually go into a common pipe at the back, which is owned by all the owners of the property of which the water goes into. So it's quite often, your water will either come to the street, it will go to an interallotment drainage at the back, or it could be dealt with by some other mechanism, but it always needs to go somewhere. There's quite often a lot of disputes occur when these pipes block up because it's a responsibility of the joint owners to do it, to repair it, not necessarily the council. Council can assist, but quite often they'll say, not our problem. And unfortunately, we get a lot of that from our councils. The other thing that you start seeing on council drains now, and just briefly, we're now starting to put baskets in the street gutters and the street drains. So we're collecting the sediment and the leaves that actually go into the council systems. You'll quite often now see wetlands. So the idea is when the water comes out of the council drains, it goes into a wetland, and it's about treating the quality of the water before it hits our harbours and our larger rivers. You'll also starting to see traps, gross pollutant traps, and other devices that council actually uses to collect trash. They're quite ugly, but they actually, they're quite important to our systems. Okay, so they're just all the terms and the sort of things we need to think of. When we're building a new property, buying a new block of ground, we're building a new house. There's several things, and I'm going to walk through these that we need to consider. And we need to consider things like the type of building, minimum floor levels, garage and driveway design, how the roof works, land filling requirements, subsoil drainage, minimum storms, major storms, and how we're going to do our landscaping, and because these are all things that are actually connected with the stormwater. Flood-prone land. If you're buying a property, one of the conveyancing issues will be to identify what the floodplain land is. In Sydney, we are probably fairly lucky that's only in the western areas, Penrith, Richmond, through that area, the Nepean Valley, we have a lot of floodplain land. But if you live in Brisbane, which is where this map is, and I was actually in Brisbane when the Brisbane floods were on, there's a quite bit of the centre of Brisbane actually is flood prone. So it's actually important that if you purchase a property or have a property, that you actually know what is going to happen in a major storm event. The other thing you need to think of when you're starting to build a property is, what is the building style? Is it going to be cut into the ground? Is it going to be elevated? A lot of councils now will not let you build in flood-prone areas, but the ones that do will actually make sure that you elevate the house on stilt-type arrangements. So you'll often see a lot of the older houses, the Queenslanders, are actually elevated off the ground, and that's for a couple of reasons. You get airflow underneath the property, which actually keeps it dry, but if there is localised flooding, it can actually go under the house and actually without damaging the house. The floor level. A lot of problems that we see out there is when the floor level is below the landscaping level. It happens time and time again. People actually, they start off, the house is above the surrounding level, they do some landscaping, they lift the level, 10, 20 years later, they're having water problems because they haven't been smart about how to actually landscape the property. And there's a couple of examples on the screen there where they've actually cut into the hill, so you're going to naturally get flow of water. Therefore, you have to collect it before it gets to the house, so that's an important design feature. What I actually say to people when they're talking about designing houses is have a series of layers of protection from water. Yeah, if you've got a property that's flowing from the backyard towards the street, catch the water at the fence, catch it halfway through the backyard, catch it before it gets to the house, and divert it around the house. Otherwise, it will go through the house and you'll have a wet yard. So you need to actually look at some multiple, but make sure that floor level is high enough that you've got actually room to work with. Driveways and garages are constant. They're constant problems, and one of the reasons is a lot of people get in their mind that, oh, it doesn't matter if the garage floods. Then they go and put all their important gear in boxes in the garage or under the house. Quite often they'll put a small drain at the front of the garage, like the example on the right-hand side. So if it's sloping away from the road, they'll put a strip drain there. What they're not thinking, though, in a major event, that will fail. So there'll be more water coming in than what that strip drain can handle. So the garage still needs to be higher than what that strip drain can take. So you always need to think of, okay, what's the minor drainage system and what's going to happen when that minor drainage system fails. I think I'm a little bit trigger sensitive here. Roof water. Gutters need inspection. Old gutters sometimes need realignment or replacement. These days, leaf guards are very smart on gutters because they minimise the maintenance of them. Yeah, a lot of things around houses, people build the house originally and then they say, okay, that's right forever. No, nothing in building is right forever. You do need to maintain it. You do need to inspect it. You need to inspect the roofs. You need to inspect the gutters. I know we do a lot of inspections now with drones, mainly for commercial premises. Because it saves you catching up with a ladder and you can do a quick inspection and you can check that there's no actual issues. And that's, and it can be fun as well. My drone driver down here. The gutters and downpipes. One thing we find with a lot of downpipes, especially in older buildings, is there's not enough of them. They've been designed under old design criteria, and we go and actually have a look, and we actually need to actually install a lot more gutters than actually what are actually in there. If I could sing, I could dance along to that, but I can't. So you're lucky. Another thing that we actually that's important thing when you're actually building a property or actually even renovating a property is the use of retaining walls. Retaining walls can quite often be a very good way to actually control and manage the water on your property, but it's important they've done right. Retaining walls, depending on what you actually make them out of, here is a rock gabion wall, which has got a very good life. But if you actually do things out of timber, you need to expect to actually replace that in 20 years' time or some period of time. So it's important when you actually do a design, do a retaining wall, that you actually understand its design life. The other thing that's actually important is drainage around that retaining wall. Quite often we'll be putting drainage, ag pipes, etc. behind it and actually underneath it. We'll be wrapping it in geofabric so sediment doesn't actually block it up and actually stop it from actually working as it should. Subsoil drainage, again, that's only works for minor events. So, but if you've got a boggy backyard, if you've got a little bit of water coming in for your neighbour, that is the perfect way to actually be able to dry up your backyard is by installing some subsoil drainage. And what we tend to do, a trench, we line it with fabric, we put the pipe in, we surround that by metal or small rock, and it actually acts as an underground a pipe for us. But you do need to be able to drain that away to a drainage system. All right, they're all minor drainage things. What you have to understand is when you get a big storm, they're all going to fail. And most people come to us and say, "Oh, the drainage system is not big enough." And we go, "Well, how big would you like it? How long is a piece of string?" We can design a perfect drainage system, but you're not going to have room for the house because the whole thing is going to be a drain. So what the important thing is you understand what the minor design is, but you know in a big storm event that every one of those is going to fail, and that you've actually got your yard designed in a way that water will still get away, that it will surcharge away without causing major damage. And that's an important concept that people actually need to understand. So here, major drainage. Yes, it will be going from property to property. It will be coming in from the backyard. Quite often, if you've got a nice little surcharge area down the side, it's great. If you can go under fences into the backyards, great. Yeah, you need to actually understand where it's going to go, but also where is your neighbour's water going to go, because that's also very important. And quite often that where smart landscaping comes in, putting the footpaths in the right spots. There is nothing wrong with the footpath getting wet when it's raining, especially if they actually take water away from your house. That's smart. It's smarter to have a low footpath that takes the water away than a high footpath that floods your house. Do they look as good? Maybe not, but they're very practical. So, open eyes. Garden areas, they slow water down. They slow water down, but you still need to capture it before it hits that house, before it actually can cause damage underneath your property. It's also important, fences. In the old days, when we had picket fences, water would flow through them, they'd flow underneath them. These days, we actually tend to have fences go right to the ground. We want to keep the dogs in, we want to keep everything else in. But what that's also doing is stopping water in a major event from actually going underneath that fence and getting away. So if we're going to prevent that from occurring, we need to actually work out what the other solutions might be. Now, an important one, who's responsible? Council? Councils are responsible under the Local Government Act, I think it was 1919 if I remember, for stormwater. But they are responsible for their own systems. So the the systems in the streets, the gutters, the major drains. They're responsible for development approval and control, along with private certifiers. Outside of that, they're not necessarily responsible for solving the problems on your own property. But quite often I will suggest to people, don't go and talk to the council engineers about the problem, especially if you've got a neighbourhood problem. Go and talk to the councillors, because it's not an engineering solution, it's a political solution. And sometimes that can actually be a smart way to use council, because quite often they're in a position to be able to coordinate many different property owners and get an overall solution where you can't do that individually. And that's always one thing we're thinking about. The homeowners. Generally, you're responsible for all water on your land. The general concept of law is you can't restrict water's natural flow. So if water is coming in from the backyard, when you build a house, you need to actually be able to deal with the water that's coming through. If you build a new development and you increase the intensity of the water because there's more paved areas, you need to put a tank in, and therefore you need to slow the water down so it's at the same rate it would have naturally been. So most of the problems, most of the responsibility is actually with the household owner, and unfortunately, quite often they're in the worst position to be able to actually deal with it. New development, so council will put regulations on. They will require hydraulic engineers to actually do proper designs, which will cater for what's happening to the neighbours and what's happening to other places. One thing that happens in stratas and in larger complexes, they are now putting a lot of devices in, like OSDs, rainwater tanks, car washers, pumping stations, and they actually now require people to actually have regular maintenance and inspections on those. And that's now starting to happen with duplexes too. So if you build a new duplex, you're likely to have to put a OSD in, and you're likely to have it inspected and cleaned every 6 months. So there is actually a cost with that, and you should be aware of that before you actually move ahead with new developments. If you're purchasing new property, conveyancing is, and everyone knows the concept of conveyancing. You get a lawyer in, they check all the legals. What they will do is identify easements, they'll identify flood-prone area, all that sort of stuff should be discussed with you by your solicitor before you purchase. Building inspection reports, so important. The fact that a building inspector says there's water issues in a property doesn't mean you shouldn't buy it. But what it means is you need to actually start investigating how you might solve those, or if that's actually a risk that you're willing to take on. And that's actually quite important that you actually do that. And if you're not comfortable with the report, get another one. If you're really not comfortable with it, don't buy it. All right, playing nice with neighbours. Sometimes this is easier said than done. I've just got a couple of examples here of what you're allowed to and not allowed to do. And this one is an example. On the right-hand side is what you're not meant to do. So if you've got a property and you decide you're getting a lot of water in from one of your neighbours, so you lift the level of your land up and then say that their water's their problem, well, at law, you're probably in the wrong. And it could be actually unlawful, and councils will probably not let you do that. But what you can do is raise your property and put a diversion path around it, so the water will continue to flow, but you've actually you've presented it with an extra a solution, as opposed to just blocking the other side off. It's much the same if you've got water coming in from the rear property. You can't just elevate it, make sure you're higher than the person behind, and say that's their problem. That will get you into trouble. But what you can do is collect it as it comes over the boundary, divert it away from your property, and potentially also have a couple of, have one at the fence, one at the backyard, and one actually at the back of the building. So there's quite a few things you can do which is lawful and will actually work for you. Overland flow, when water's going from one side to another, you can't block it. So this is a sort of surcharge event. So it might be that you need to have a bit of a swale in your front yard. So this is where we're actually talking about how you landscape things, or it might be that you can push it out onto the road or something. But you do need to consider it and come up with what would be a good solution for your property and for your neighbours' properties. There are situations where there are easements across properties with small pipes in there. And the problem with filling over that small pipe is the surcharge stops occurring. So it might be that you can put a larger pipe in there, that you can put a swale in there. There's always one or two solutions to any problem that you actually might have with water and actually how you might address those. Raising the land isn't the only issue. So I talked earlier about impervious fencing. So if you fence to the ground and you stop water flow, there could be a case at law, and it's probably in a civil court, not any other court, where your neighbour can say that you're preventing the water from flowing from their property, and therefore you're at fault if something occurs to their property. And that's just something you need to be aware of. And there's always a solution. It might be that you can lift it. It might be that you use a different type of fencing. It might be that there's a mesh at the base as opposed to being solid. So there's quite a few solutions that you can come up with. Now, disputes. Well, hopefully they won't end up in the High Court, yeah, because all that does is cost money. The bottom line with any disputes is like any neighbourhood disputes. If you can discuss it with your neighbour and come to a solution, that's the cheapest. It's like a divorce. As soon as you get the lawyers involved, the lawyers will make money and no one else is going to be happy. You can get advice from your council. You can get advice from an organisation like ourselves. But the first option, it needs to really be to consult your neighbour and talk to them and then try to present evidence. There are a few dispute agencies that you can use. One is a local court and the other is fair trading. So there are some mechanisms that you can actually use if you do get into a dispute, especially with a neighbour. Now, I just want to talk about a couple of real world cases. So here we've got a property, northern beaches of Sydney. They're on the low side of the road. They're actually getting water come in off the road every time, and even in minor events, but definitely in major events, and was washing into the property, into the house, into the garage, down the gardens, making a fairly big mess. This was actually a quite major construction, and we changed the grades of the property. We changed the grades of the driveway. We put some strip drainage in to actually collect the water. But then we've actually, down the sides of the house, actually made some footpaths with hobs on the side. So we're actually directing all the major water around the house into an area where it wasn't going to affect. It was a very concrete solution. And I don't necessarily say that's always the right way to do them, but on this premises, that was actually quite a good solution for us. Just another case that we do quite regularly, especially in the inner city areas. The downpipes quite often go across the footpath and into the gutters. Normally, if they block up or get damaged, and this little company called the NBN has a history of actually damaging pipes and not fixing them, but it is a problem of the owner. The owner is responsible, not the council. And we keep having clients wish to try to sue the council. I wish them all luck, but I've never seen it actually work yet. It's the responsibility of the owner, and quite often it's a dig out the pipe, replace it with some ductile or something that's quite solid, that's not going to get damaged actually in the curb. And quite often, if you don't do that, you'll actually then get back up into your house or your drains and they're not emptying, which is causing problems in the property. My clicker's worn out. Another property here where we've had substantial water running down from the backyard, and it's been running in underneath the house into the garage, into the storage areas. One thing with fixing these types of problems, quite often it's let's fix this bit, see if that fixes it, let's fix a bit more, see if that fixes it, let's fix a bit more. Otherwise, you're wasting a lot of money on the ultimate design, which might not be needed. Because with water, you have to understand that it always wins, and it's a tricky little so-and-so. It'll find ways around it that you don't know. On this property here, we actually had to remove side stairs. We've cleaned them out. We've put subsoil drainage underneath. We've put pipes through there, collecting water from the back with a pit. We've then waterproofed the side of the house, so water couldn't get through the walls, and actually then reinstalled stairways with hobs to actually keep water from the property on the other side. This premises we're still doing a bit of work on because there's a bit more water getting in from another location around the back. And we've worked with his owner to say, well, let's do this first, see how much that controls, and then we can actually look at the next step so that we don't overinvest in it. So just to summarise, water always wins. If you're having water problems, and it doesn't matter if it's damp or it's water running through your property into your garage, quite often you need a layer of different solutions. You also need to understand that minor floods and major floods work completely differently. And you have to know what's going to happen when you actually have a major flood. Talking to your neighbours, because often water running through is a neighbourhood problem. It's not necessarily your problem alone. Stormwater does need maintenance, the same as everything else actually in your house. And once again, water always wins. We've actually got a stand at A33, which is over the other side. I've got a couple of my guys here. Paul's a builder, I'm an engineer, and one of our other guys here is a plumber. So we try to look at the whole aspect of the plumbing. Anyway, thank you.
Please put your hands together. David, I think you have managed to hold this audience here talking about stormwater. From a design point of view, it's probably like there when they start. But all of you have to get into your heads that when you deal with these great designers and builders and they build you this amazing home and paint your walls a fantastic colour and plant these amazing gardens and put the gorgeous curtains in, all of that can be undone by the stormwater. I'm sure you've seen some shocking cases of what water does to property and really depletes all of that money that you've invested.
It's most modern architects have got their head around about water and water flow. One of the big problems, and one of the reasons we actually formed Stormwater Sydney, is because we're finding that plumbers didn't want to deal with stormwater. Builders thought it was a plumber's issue. Plumbers thought it was a landscaper's issue. Landscapers thought it was somebody else's issue, and nobody was actually solving some of the solutions. If you get a good hydraulic engineer and a good builder, if you get a set of plans and they're going through all the architecturals, ask the question, how's the drainage going to work and what happens when it fails? Because if you actually say what's going to happen in a big storm event and they can't answer you, they need to go back and actually do a bit more work for you. Because you can have the nicest rumpus room underground, fitted out beautiful, and soon get brought undone with a major storm event if it comes in through the back wall.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're watching Titanic and it becomes a real thing as the water starts pouring through the walls.
Or Jaws.
Or Jaws. David, in my job I deal with people building new homes and renovating. I think that side of the business is a preparatory way of dealing with things, and I think it has increased so much. But a lot of the audience here are looking at properties that they're going to be buying with the view of renovating. If you go on a watery, rainy day, you can possibly see how the water is reacting on the site, leaving or not leaving. On a dry day, is there any signs or any things that people could sort of see that they think a little bell starts doing that there's an issue?
There's the first thing you need to look at when you look at a property is where's water going to fall? Is it higher at the back or is it higher at the front? If you go to a property and there's a natural flow that it looks like everything's going to go down your driveway into your garage, it probably will be. And if you've got water on driveways, quite often you can see it after the last storm event. But if you've got a backyard that's coming straight down the hill and you can't see grates in there, you can't see pits in there, there's likely not to be anything in there. You can actually look under houses to see if there's a lot of damp there, because if there's a lot of damp there, it's suggesting water's coming in from somewhere. and you actually need to deal with it. And if you're not sure, take a friend, take a builder, take a plumber, when you actually go and have a look at the place and crawl under the place and actually have a look around. But water runs downhill, and you just need to think about when the water fills up all the minor drainage systems, where's it going to go?
And just finally, with the landscaping, it's that final layer, almost like the cushions and the curtains inside the house is the layer. On the outside, it's the beautiful landscaping. I think that people underestimate. They have this amazing home, these beautiful front paths, these, blue stone paving. Water running over the top of those constantly and not leaving the site is causing my mother, my daughter, or myself this obvious issue. Those can be rectified, though, by drains and being able to deal with it. So if you see this, it's not just a don't buy this house scenario.
No, it's not don't buy the place, but you do have to be very careful. We have a lot of people say, oh, can you put a couple of drains in? And they've got this in their head that it's a $2,000 fix. And we go there and we go, the ultimate fix is $100,000. The half fix, which might work, is $50,000. And just doing some tidy up is $30,000, and they almost fall off their chairs.
Of course.
But I'd prefer to be realistic with them up front, and get them to really think about that, because it's you're buying risk. If you can fix it cheaper, great.
Yeah.
If it's going to cost you more, make sure that's within your actual budget and you can afford it. And if you're not sure about the advice you're being given, get more advice. Same as a doctor. If you don't like what the first guy says, go to the next girl. Go to somebody else.
Yeah. And I think the cost of rectifying it with the new building or fixing the whole back of the house is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, so you're still well ahead. David Nixon, Stormwater Sydney, you speak with passion about your field. You know what you're talking about. You can definitely tell. I shook his hand. He's got this damn big hand to be able to shake. You know he can judge a good tradie or knows what he's talking about. But you've also got a team here who've got some leaflets. Point out again where you are.
So we're over just where the entrance to the Mind, Body and Soul.
Yeah.
We actually do have a competition there. You can win $500 worth of quality garden supplies just by scanning our little picture. So come and see us, come and talk to us. We also actually have a special for that show.
There we go.
There's normally a $280 call-out inspection fee. We've halved that for the show if anyone mentions the show over the next few weeks. And if you're in Australia, we'll also do an inspection there for free as a show special. But the quality garden controls, they're really cool.
Now, just look down the camera there, mate, because the people who can't make it in here, we are live streaming. Hello, everyone. You can find out all the details, obviously, on the Sydney Home Show website, but also your website. Can you give us those details, please?
Stormwatersydney.com.
Too damn easy. Did you see how I slid damn in there? You do. Thanks so much. A great presentation. Thanks to everyone. Please put your hands together. We really enjoyed that. We've got another lot of presentations coming up today. Next one will be at 12 o'clock. We have got Sarah and George coming here today from the block. You might have followed their journey. It's going to be pretty exciting. We look forward to seeing you soon. Go out and learn, and then come back and learn some more. Thanks so much.